Okay, welcome back. Hour number 2. Time to say hello to Dr. Bill Deagle. Bill is with us weekly, and we talk about a number of things. Certainly at the top of the list is always the greatest calamity ever visited upon this planet by humankind, and that is Fukushima Daiichi. Now, keep in mind that there are, I don't know how many reactors in the U.S., 103, 104, something like that, and nearly 500 around the planet, any of which could suffer similar, although there'd be variations, fates, as has the Fukushima plant. We are in grave trouble. There are people talking legitimately and credibly about a potential mass extinction event. I don't know if I'd go there, but it's on the table. Everything's on the table because we don't know what's happening. We don't know where the cores are. We don't know how to do it. The technology does not exist to go in there and remove them from underground. There is one test well dug adjacent to the 4 reactors. I think it's adjacent to number 1, maybe number 3. But at 75 feet in depth, 25 meters, they're finding ungodly amounts of strontium-90 in the groundwater, in that underground aquifer that's flowing through and under the plant and right into the ocean. So there's a lot going on. Now, over here, we have the issue of the New Mexico disaster, and it is showing every sign of being a disaster. It also is showing every sign of another event which the Department of Energy has lied to us about. All right, it's called WIPP, W-I-P-P. It's in New Mexico. They're admitting now that apparently the entire underground mine collapsed directly on the canisters, they're 55-gallon drums and such, of highly radioactive waste. Now, when they say radioactive waste, they're not specific. We don't know what exactly is in these canisters, but apparently it's a lot worse than anyone wants to talk about. We're being lied to. They said in the beginning, right after the collapse, they didn't describe it as a collapse. They just said it was a mishap, an accident. Don't worry, be happy. That everybody involved with it, all the workers were exposed and were reading plutonium on them, among other radionuclides. So this is bad stuff. It's not a joke. Now that's home, and that's again something that not even a nuclear power plant. We're not going to learn, I guess, until it's too late. And it may be too late. We just don't know. For you folks who live along the coast, the water is not here yet, the most polluted portion of the Pacific, which is most of it. It could be weeks away. We're not sure. But there have been advanced pockets of radiation that have come up on shore. So we'll keep you posted about that as well. Hello, Bill, and welcome back.
Hi, Jeff, and hi, everybody out there. Lots of new developments. You mentioned about the WIPP plant. We talked about that today in the third hour of my program with my nuclear safety expert, his radio name, Chris Harris. There's the big problem right now is there are a lot of lessons that should have been learned from Fukushima about similar plants here in America and around the world. But basically, the learning curve is flat. The WIPP plant basically is not only irradiating local people, we don't know if it's actually contaminating local water. We don't know if it's venting locally. One of the things that I know as a nuclear scientist is that you can take every nuclear plant in the world and draw circles at different distances out from the plant.
Like a bullseye.
If you look at like a bullseye, if you look at specific illnesses from Alzheimer's to diabetes to small for dates, babies, everything you can think of in terms of major medical and minor problems and developmental delay, you'll find that the closer you are to a nuclear plant within 125 to 150 miles, the more of these illnesses, including dementia, you'll find. All nuclear plants vent off tritium,
every day,
thorium, and other isotopes. All, not some, all.
Every day.
Some of them are much worse off now. They're getting what we call geriatric nuclear plants. And, for example, they had a plant a few years ago in Illinois where they actually went in to try to see if they could test the tubes to see how fragile they were, and they actually took a brush to the tubes, and literally with a brush to look at the tubes from the inside, they actually shattered them.
Oh, good.
So that's a nuclear reactor just outside Chicago.
Yeah.
So I've experienced taking care of employees working in a nuclear reactor south of Chicago near Pekin, Peoria, Illinois, and central Illinois, and taking care of employees at the Savannah River plant that also had plutonium pellets they're making for detonators for nuclear warheads and Rocky Flats. So my experience is that basically we're learning nothing, we're doing nothing, And in fact, Obama now says as part of his green policy is to expand nuclear power plant certification in America. And there's two plants that are now being certified to go forward in Georgia, and of course the MOX reactor plants, which they've been lobbying for. And I think there's a senator that's involved there, Senator down in South Carolina, has been lobbying for some years for the MOX reactor plant and wants to convert many other plants to MOX, which is called mixed oxygen fuel. It's like reactor number 3 in Fukushima. These are hot reactors. They're very touchy. They can go critical really quickly. They generate more power, but they also generate a highly toxic plutonium, which is difficult to dispose of.
Yeah, well, that's the famous Lindsey Graham, the super hawk who wants this MOX reactor in South Carolina. He's another nutcase. Of course.
When you look at him, you see someone who looks like he's just coming down from a spell of mania, and you think, what is this guy talking about? And he talks like without very much hesitation, like a man driven. And I'm thinking, what's driving you? I mean,
I agree.
He looks like a man driven by something.
He's on an agenda, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's got an agenda, and his agenda is dark. Just like the agenda of NATO and the agenda that's pushing this crisis in Ukraine. And of course, it's not just one issue. These are all epiphenomena of the collapse of the banking system, and they're bound to fail.
Yeah. By the way, Lindsey Graham is probably not happy, but the Department of Energy plans to stop work on the multi-billion-dollar MOX plant that is supposed to reprocess plutonium from nuclear weapons, but the production costs of the plant, the actual building, the construction, are getting to be so high now. There's such graft and corruption there that they had to stop it. It's too expensive. Anyway, this is just out in the last couple days, so it's on hold.
Yeah, no, that's good news. But the problem is that the whole nuclear industry is graft and corruption. If it had to survive on its own finances and deal with the liability issues, no nuclear reactor would be set up or operational anywhere in the world.
None. And how many times have you heard, folks, if you remember back when during the heyday of building these plants, they'd go back and they'd find during construction that how the welders weren't welding properly. Nobody gives a damn. It's just they found so many flaws and problems at many, many different plants, and these are the ones we heard about. So, yeah, the quality of workmanship, shall we say, is not what it could have been.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the things that have gone on in Fukushima now, basically, what we talked about today in the plan is that apparently the location of the ice wall they're going to build around the Fukushima plant is going to start below the plant, but actually their plan is to encircle the plant. Now, if you take an ice wall and you encircle it, because they've used it temporarily to stop slurry from...
They're going to encircle the plant 360 degrees.
Yes, and I don't know how far out they're going to go, but the problem is, if you're pouring water in there, you're going to turn it into a radioactive oatmeal punch bowl.
Of course.
And the second thing is when the hot corium hits it, it's going to cause a burst reaction against the ice wall, and you'll not only burst and bend
it'll fracture it.
It'll fracture it. You'll end up with a massive release of radiation. So I don't think they've thought this through well. I mean, it might work against cold, slurry from coal mining, where they temporarily stop it so you don't end up with a disaster. But this is not going to work when you have a permanent wall set up and you have migrating hot corium.
I agree. Okay, well, good luck to them.
Good luck. Now, the other thing is my article that I did and released last week.
Yeah.
I found a few typos in it. I'm adding some additional material to it, so I'm going to update that, and that will be ready in the next couple of days.
Good.
If people read that article, they'll see that using research and imagination and a lot of prayer, we've come together as a team with specific technical answers to solve every issue of Fukushima, and also to start dealing with issues really other plants. So when I hear the whiners out there that say, there's nothing we can do, then read the articles, read the analysis. A lot of this is, what I call low tech or novel answers with off-the-shelf technology that can be used right now or imaginative things, like, for example, dealing with subatomic, basically transmutation of elements, which we know is the basic background for the Hadron Collider. They're trying to build one that's much bigger, but the center point of all alchemy over the last thousands of years is transmutation. It turns out that whenever you do nuclear reactions, in fact, if you have a nuclear war and a nuclear bomb hits an area, even sitting isotopes in the area are modified by the neutron flux, and you actually change the structure of the matter where the nuclear bomb goes off, so there's a change in the isotope pattern. So transmutation of elements is something that I think we should think of seriously, because you can't filter the Pacific Ocean. You have to start thinking out of the box at things, technology. If we do have it, it's sequestered away in Warehouse 13. And if we don't have it, we better develop it.
Agreed. Stand by a second, Bill. We'll come right back. And when Bill's article is updated and ready, we'll post it for you here at Rense. So you'll see it here, too. Back in a minute. Okay, back talking with Dr. Bill Deagle. This WIP mine collapse, I remember the first report, they were very non-specific about anything. And then it came, well, the roof fell in on a couple of the things. Now the whole mine roof apparently collapsed on all this stuff. So how are they going to go in there and dig it out? But it's emitting deadly radiation, plutonium. These are from the American Nuclear Weapons Program. These are byproducts and leftovers and parts of the process that are extremely contaminated, that are buried down there. So again, it's weapons related. Same old. They call it leftover radioactive plutonium and americium or americum. I don't know how you want to pronounce it. I guess it's americium from the U.S. Nuclear Weapons Program. The town nearby, Carlsbad, is apparently reading varying levels of radiation there. So this is not something deep underground that's contained at all. It's a big problem. And again, it just points to the entire tenuous condition of the entire industry. Here they dig this mine, and the geologists, I'm sure, assured them it'll be just fine. And they put all this stuff down there, and it collapsed. So there you go. You never know. Tomorrow we could wake up and we could have a double, triple meltdown at any one of a number of locations in this country, because all the nuclear power plants here are either beyond their normal, original projected use time period, and they're in on borrowed time, quite literally, or they're nearing it. So we are just not doing good. We did close San Onofre. That was good.
They'll also be posting over when I update the article with some new emails. And we have, the first thing is that nuclear fuel recovery work underway at Fukushima plant was strewn with massive debris. And it is actually almost like some dark humor here. They have a slogan on one of the steel pillars on the site that says, "Don't fall, don't drop, and don't get trapped." Posted on a steel pillar. Why? Maybe that was the level of kindness of the Yakuza that's sending them to the radioactive death. Also, we have an update on info for tonight's show. We talked about the ALPS, or the Advanced Liquid Processing System,
broken down again,
which is not online now, and nor will it be in the near future. And we discussed that the current system does not, NOT, absorb strontium. It says strontium is released directly into the Pacific Ocean. And, of course, also this last paragraph talks about the welded tanks are supposed to replace the 1,000 bolted tanks, which are connected inadequately. They left out a lot of the lower rivets, so they obviously, it's the old story like, "Dear, did you read the instructions before you put it together?"
They actually left out the rivets and the bolts. They didn't tighten the bolts. It's unbelievable. So they're actually talking, I didn't know this, about replacing the entire 1,000 tanks
1,000 tanks with actually welded tanks, and they're going slowly. Apparently, the welding process is a really slow process, and they obviously don't have properly trained people putting these together. And of course, if you do welds, you have to X-ray your welds to make sure they're
every
actually
time.
Good. Yeah, otherwise you don't know that the welds are going to hold.
Well, that's how they found the problems with the plants here when they were building them. They were X-raying them, and all right.
Yeah, and not only that, if you have a crack already and you have neutron fluxes, it changes the crystal structure of the metal, and it causes neutron annealing, so the metal ages much, much faster. So it causes structural deterioration.
Well, the tanks now have a useful life of 5 years. They're into their second or third year in some cases. And so the welded tanks probably have 10 years, something like that, because they're going to rust. They're going to rust. And they eventually will, as you say, because of neutron flux, start to deteriorate. This is all, it's eventually all this stuff's going to go in the ocean. Everybody knows it.
Well, listen to this. Apparently TEPCO's plan to make sure the groundwater doesn't flow back into the reactor buildings is they have groundwater bypass pumps to pump the water up from the groundwater and discharge it directly into the sea before
That's what they're trying to do. Yeah. Bypass wells.
Bypass, yeah. So that's the kind of thing that's going on. Now, when we deal with things like WIP, I mean, you can go around the country to many different plants where the first and biggest problem is that many of the plants are within strike distance of a earthquake strike zone if it's an earthquake 7.5 to 8. There's 25 major reactor sites along New Madrid that are within the strike zone, and up to a third of the reactors in the United States are within the strike zone of an earthquake, like Diablo Canyon in Northern California, and also the San Onofre reactor, which is near the Jacinta upthrust zone, which is actually 4 times closer than the upthrust zone that caused the tsunami in Fukushima. So
4 times closer.
Off Catalina Island.
San Jacinto upthrust zone, 4 times closer than the one that caused. Oh.
Yeah, so it's really, really close. In other words, it's only a matter of time before there's a major tsunami off the California coast.
And don't forget to remember that San Onofre, even though it's not operational, has an enormous amount of spent fuel pool sitting there. 35 years, 40 years worth.
Plus, it's got a steam turbine system set up where it has to continually circulate water just so it doesn't go critical. So, although it's not generating power, they're still running the pumps, and they still have to operate it. So it's disconnected from the grid, but the reactors are not.
People don't know about decommissioning. They think, you're going to shut it down, it's all done. No, it's constant, chronic maintenance forever. You can't just walk away from these things.
And, of course, the latest thing is now they're fighting over who's going to pay. Is it the ratepayer? Which they're going to try to raise our rates by something like 12 or 13% for Orange County and San Diego County.
They're going to punish them.
Yeah, and I don't think what's going to happen is it could be something similar to TEPCO, where basically TEPCO's walked away and decided not to spend anything on it.
Yeah.
In fact, the latest I've heard is that they've actually made a profit in the last quarter.
They are in profit. That's right. I ran the story. It's bizarre.
Amazing. So that's Fukushima. Here's my prediction for 2014, 2015. We're going to have more earthquakes. 500% more likely that we're going to have not only Fukushima, but there were 5 other major plants in northern Japan that were actually hit. And they almost lost control of their reactor cores, but they managed to maintain them. Mm-hmm. A lot of these plants were structurally damaged, including one of the reactors on the north side of Honshu that actually broke through one of the what's called cooling pools, and they lost 400 gallons of highly radioactive water on the site after the earthquake struck. Now, it turns out that the fault line, I mentioned in the previous show, the fault line running from Mount Fuji runs directly toward the same fault zone and earthquake zone that actually runs through Fukushima Daiichi and reactor number 1. So Mount Fuji's magma chamber is refilling, and about every 180 years it blows. And it turns out it's acting like it's going to blow again soon. Soon might be 5 years or 10 years, but it's building. And it creates a death zone around it, around 75 to 90 miles plus. So if we have a major 7+ earthquake, it's likely anything that's above ground, like these cooling pools, is going to lose control, and you're going to have a massive pyrophoric fire and criticality, what we call small nuclear explosions. Not just at Fukushima, but I think that there's a good possibility to lose containment at other reactor sites that are already damaged. The Japanese have turned on their reactors, not off. That's what's going on there.
All right.
Because of the economy, they told us if they didn't turn them on, they're going to crash their economy. It's going to be a balance sheet of debt.
Yeah. Well, it's a balance sheet of deaths is what it is.
Yeah, I think we forgot the EA.
You got it.
Deaths.
Hang on a second. We'll be right back. Okay, and here we go. By the way, if I can, Bill, let me just play a little bit of Arnie Gunderson's newest piece on the whip problem. This is another cover-up, folks, just like Hanford.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not on the Columbia River, but the Columbia River is quite obviously doomed.
There's things happening there, too, by the way.
Yeah, okay. Well, here's a little bit of Arnie, and I'll put this up. You can find it on the internet, but I'll put it up tonight as well. Okay, here we go.
In addition to the continuing releases from the Fukushima Daiichi triple meltdowns, our focus today is on a U.S. nuclear waste project in New Mexico that's contaminated workers and is leaking radioactivity into the surrounding environment. Located in Carlsbad, New Mexico, this Department of Energy, that's the DOE, experimental nuclear waste dump, is attempting to store leftover radioactive plutonium and americium from the U.S. weapons program. For those of you who follow nuclear waste storage issues, you'd know that americium has a radioactive half-life of several hundred years, while plutonium is radioactive for 250,000 years. Fairwinds Energy Education has received many questions about this serious nuclear safety failure. We have continuously been updating this issue on the Fairwinds Twitter feed, the Fairwinds Facebook page, and in press interviews. Common Dreams has also posted 4 separate and complete interviews with me on this calamity. And we've placed those links at the end of this video on the page.
Interesting how he called it a calamity.
On our Facebook page and on our Twitter feed. So what is this waste isolation pilot project called the WIP? Nuclear power and nuclear weapons both leave toxic remnants. In other words, toxic trash that must be isolated for hundreds of thousands of years. Because this waste is highly toxic radioactive debris, it has to be locked away so it doesn't migrate into the air we breathe, the water we drink, or the food we eat. The nuclear weapons industry and the nuclear power industry claim that this toxic material is not a problem, and it's safe to store in underground salt mines, which they hope are impervious to water and therefore will not allow this toxic nuclear debris to migrate. On the other hand, many state legislatures, city councils, intervenor groups, landlords, and farms near the site, as well as environmental groups, worry that no site in the world can accommodate and store such toxic nuclear debris for 250,000 years.
Okay, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's nuts. This whole thing of plutonium is nuts.
It's a fantasy.
It's a total fantasy. And where's the outrage? We're outraged, and you listening are, but where are the American people?
You can see how the media uses techniques to create a cognitive dissonance.
Oh, yeah.
What they do is they'll basically tell them, be very afraid, and then they'll tell them, don't worry, be happy. And eventually people basically get saturated with conflicting messages, so they just shut down.
They shut down. Yep. Exactly.
And same thing's going on with Fukushima.
People don't want to hear about it anymore, Bill. They just tune it out.
If it's not, it's like watching The Voice on television. If people saw the last 2 programs, they don't want to think about it. Well, that was last year. That's old news. It's almost like their life is like a made-for-TV movie, and this isn't reality anymore. This is like a video game. Play, press, and reset, and everything will be fine. Your adducted DNA, your shattered chromosomes, your destroyed germ cell line, your deformed babies without brains. They're 400% increased now in southern Washington State.
Keep in mind, that's why the seed vaults are being stocked as fast as they can.
Yeah, well, that's one of a number of reasons. They can amplify this, but there's other global cataclysms that occur that could affect the seed vaults.
Sure.
But they're obviously accelerating it because, if they have a major downturn in the economy, which precipitates a major war, which will always eventually go nuclear. I mean, there's no such thing as a proxy war. When they talk about wars where Poland might cross into Ukraine and we have treaties between Poland and the NATO nations, there's no such thing as a war now that's a proxy war that won't turn eventually. It may take years, but it won't eventually turn into a nuclear war. And the problem is that we have the equivalent of nuclear weapons with biological and other weapons, and mankind won't survive it. So, rather than fighting each other, we need to use energy and technology to get away from the big mistake of boiling water with radioisotopes. We need to get away from the mistake that we should use breeder reactors. I mean, even the Canadians had little sense to use CANDU reactors that didn't generate highly enriched uranium. They took a different technology, but the American reactors, and the ones they proliferate, all basically are breeder reactors. So they generate higher levels of isotopes that can be used to create a nuclear weapon. And there's really no excuse because the byproducts, such as depleted uranium, end up in shells, and a lot of our veterans that came back, and by the way, they're in a lot of the equipment they repositioned here in America with the militarization of our police forces.
Yeah, those MRAPs they're giving to all the police agencies. I think they've given it. What,
they were covered with yellow cake, okay?
Yeah.
Covered with it, all over the place. When they were in battlefields, the yellow cake was falling on them. They never completely decontaminated them. I talked to people that actually showed me pictures of yellow cake on top of these MRAP and Bearcats sitting on rail yards in Illinois and Indiana.
And the M1A1 Abrams tanks sitting on flat cars in Kansas, same thing.
Right.
Can't go near them.
Yeah, can't go near them. And I took care of the guys that got sick from it. And I asked my boss, at the time, if I could do heavy metals radiotoxicology testing. He said, "You'll get fired or worse." I said, "What's worse?" He said, "How about dead?" I said, "Don't threaten me, Major, or you won't be getting up in the morning to put your socks on." So you have to have a backbone with these people because they assume we're all going to be just rollovers. We're just going to roll over. They don't show respect for you unless you stand up to them. And I tell people out there that they need to start really the process of significant advanced decontamination. And we talked about this a little bit before. And I have a tendency to talk too fast, but I want to stick to just one or two things now.
Okay.
We talked about, say, Nutri-Trala, long-acting alpha-lipoic acid.
Yeah.
Which we have at NutriMedical, and it recycles your antioxidant, so it's going to protect you from the radiation effects in your body. And we talked also before about liquid zeolite that just grabs the radioisotope.
That's really a big one because we have to take a break, but there's a lot of talk about French green clay, any kind of the clay.
Our Keeler Max is probably the best oral chelator for heavy metals. And by the way, something as simple as our high-quality probiotic will reduce radioisotope absorption by 85%.
Great. Okay. Hold on a second, Bill. We'll come right back. Okay, and we're back with Dr. Bill talking about some of the products he has for you. And they're very good. First-rate, frontline products. Okay, we got a lot to talk about here, so what else do you want to add?
A couple of other things. In terms of the situation, in terms of what's going on the ground in Fukushima, we can be pretty certain that they're hitting a wall. They've got over 400 of the fuel rod assembly bundles pulled from the cooling pool number 4, but they out of 1,500 plus. But they're significantly slowing down, and I think what's happening is the fuel rod assembly bundles are so pulled, of course, they can't get them out now.
No,
they're
bent,
try to pull
broken,
them out, the fuel rod pellets will drop out.
That's
and
right.
If they go critical, they'll start to actually degrade the bottom of the cooling pool.
Goodbye.
Boil off the water.
Goodbye.
Or break the seal, and then you'll have a massive increase in chance of a pyrophoric fire. So whether it's an earthquake, subsidence, or just continue to try to do something, which I think is not smart, which is trying to move these twisted fuel rod assembly bundles rather than to neutralize them, I think they're going to have an accident with these untrained workers there. And the idea of an ice wall is another stupid thing. The idea they're going to rebuild all these new containers, and what they do now is they've lost, they don't have, they don't have enough space to put all the water. So
right.
What they're doing, the field workers are basically saying, you want more space because we're going to pump it out of the area around the reactor core.
Mm-hmm.
So they pump out the tanks directly into the ocean, and then they have tanks open to take in water. So during this transition phase where they're building these new tanks are welded, this is a very slow process apparently. And so between pulling the fuel rod assembly bundles and building the new tanks, this is a disaster waiting for an earthquake or subsidence or some other disaster. So I'm willing to bet, I call them burps of radiation. You're going to have major burps of radiation major venting into the ocean through under-oceanic steam vents, and then back into the ground, going back toward the cracks in the rock that'll end up going all the way to the tube drain system for Greater Tokyo, which is why some people taking radiation detectors underground in the tube train systems for Tokyo have actually noticed in Greater Tokyo area that some of the levels are very high. So they act like a piston sucking in air and also pulling in air from the rocks. Can communicate for many kilometers. So I think the people in Japan are in grave danger right now. And the number of women that are having children with monstrous birth defects is a very, very grave cover-up. And
you're not hearing anything about it? Sure.
It's very shameful that this is going on. Now, there's things that you can do to protect yourself. You can not only protect your DNA with things like our malignant block and the ellagic acid, because it'll repair your DNA and cause the cells to commit apoptosis or suicide. You can chelate out with Kilormax and with our liquid zeolite. You can stop the free radicals because basically fast electrons or beta particles strip the cells of their electrons and they create acidity. So you can add electrons with our Power C+, which is the only mixed mineral ascorbate with bioperin. You can create an alkaline situation with our long-acting alpha-lipoic acid and the Power C. And you can do other things to protect the mitochondria, such as our acetyl glutathione and a product called Regenerex. And what these combinations will do is protect your cells from more ion channel damage and more DNA damage and help to get the isotopes out of there. Even something as simple as a super high quality probiotic, and Dr. Asaf Jurakovic did work on this. It can prevent you from inhaling radiotoxin fleas, and then the cilia push it down about 1.5 liters to 2 liters of mucus to your gastrointestinal tract. And if you have a leaky gut, you're going to actually absorb those radiotoxins, and they're going to go to your liver and your splanchnic circulation and end organs like your brain and other organs. But if your gut is healthy because you have the right probiotic bacteria and you don't have inflammatory reactions occurring in your gut, you cut down the absorption by 85%. So there's some simple things you can do. Drinking filtered water, having HEPA filters in your home, having a radiation detector to know that if outside it's very radioactive, you seal off your house with duct tape and use the approach that it's a hazmat situation until that wave of radiation passes and the counts per minute drop back to background or close to. I don't see people doing that.
Bill, it's important that all of you who have detectors wherever you live get out and do readings now and keep a little diary, a little chart, graph, whatever you want to do, what the readings are, what the date is, so you'll have a background to work from. Now's the time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to, I have an Inspector Plus, but I think in my studio I'm going to hook one up outside and put it on a USB port so that I'll put it to my computer so it'll actually be a posting, because I think it puts up some instructions on how people can become a kind of like a live radiation detector site.
Yeah, we have that. It's under radiation, second box on the right-hand side of the page. Just scroll down. Shows you exactly, David has explained it, how to build your own station live. We'll plug you right into Rense.com, and we really appreciate it.
And by the way, the one that you can do through our NutriMedicals through LessEMF, if you go to our website, LessEMF, is the best lower-cost radiation detector that's data logging. So you can actually plug it directly in the USB, have a long USB cord, put it outside, and it'll actually data log immediately and tell you counts per minute what's going on. It's not as sensitive as an Inspector Plus, which you can... or an Inspector EXP that has a radiation detection arm, but it's half the cost, because a really good one is about $600-700. This other device is around $250, and it has a good data logging connection and sensitive enough to pick up significant radiation surges. So that's the situation there. I think one of the things I think and I mentioned this a few weeks ago, that why people don't want to listen is they don't have a true spiritual basis behind why they won't even challenge if they know the truth. So people are either distracted, addicted, or paralyzed in fear. And it's hard to say on an individual day what people are thinking, but obviously when you raise issues like Fukushima Daiichi, people don't hear it if it's not in the latest news reports. And the real issue isn't whether or not the information is valid, because if if it was a course that they had to pass in college, and you had to actually regurgitate the information that we're presenting in papers, they probably could regurgitate it, but there's no emotional link because they're spiritually empty. And that's because they've been massaged by the media and by the churches and by everyone to kind of ignore it. Like if you go into a public place or a meeting like a city council and everybody, it's not just on the West Coast. Have you raised the issue and literally been shut down?
Yep.
Or if you try to raise it in church and say, hey, Pastor, what do you think about what's going on in Japan and Fukushima? Or what do you think of the danger of the situation in Ukraine getting out of hand and the exchange of nuclear weapons? You generally get an idea of like, well, why are you raising that? You're going to ruin our day and make it negative. And I tell people the only way it's going to get positive is if we start creating the future that we want. And that is face the facts and start picking up our scepter. I tell people, and start acting as a son or daughter of the Most High, actually using our imagination, using prayer, using research, and using honesty to move forward and say, we've sinned against the future and against each other by allowing this to happen. We need to share the shame of the Japanese who are completely denying that this is happening to them. And, here in America, we're in the tailpipe of this mess. And if a major earthquake strikes, we will have such radiation levels that it will be very scary in the next few years if a woman gets pregnant. Will she have a normal child? And, of course, you're not just dealing with the radiation from Hanford in southern Washington State. You're dealing with Fukushima, but already the reports are that there's a 400% increase in children being born with anencephaly, no brain, or very little brain.
Very little.
Very little. And that's happening right now. So
that's in Yakima area in Washington.
Right. Yeah, which, of course, is very near. And Hanford is having major leaks. And the government's covering it up like crazy. This has been going on for decades, but it's getting considerably worse.
Worse all the time.
And the problem is they really need to do a diversion project to divert the Columbia River completely away from that area. The area is not going to get solved quickly, but you do not want that into the Columbia River.
It's already going.
Yeah, I know, but
the
there's
volume is low.
There that we want to believe, the same way as a lot of radioactive trash that's been dropped off of San Francisco, and those barrels don't have a 1,000-year expiry date.
No, they're off the Farallones, and they are rusting and rotting. We don't know exactly what's in them, but that's going to be a problem too. The government will try to blame.
Radioactive.
Well, they'll try to blame those barrels on some of the radiation that will be washing up on the beaches from Fukushima, but it'll be too much. They won't be able to. Here's a quickie. A nuclear-friendly magazine wrote an article about Fukushima, and they indicated that, I don't know what their sources are, but they say the melted fuel, the corium, is actually still glowing, lava-like. Now, nobody knows where the corium is from each reactor, but they've got to report the stuff is still red hot and working its way down and down and down. Remember, the test well picked it up at 75 feet. Now, the thing about WIP that's interesting, I think you know this, but anyway, if you don't, the storage facility is built in a salt mine a half-mile deep. It's way down there. And they have to run air in and out of there to keep it suitable for humans to work in. So they got a vent problem. That's where part of the release was actually emitted into the outside air with this fan system.
Right, because they had to vent air down there, and it's going to come out.
Of course.
People are getting contaminated.
There are over 100 operating oil and gas wells within 1 mile of the WIP site. So if this stuff, the roof did cave in on a part of the storage facility, and you got loose plutonium and everything, the potential is it could work its way through the geology. We don't know.
Right, which means you're going to get radioactive hydrocarbons that will then get sent to refineries, and then they'll refine out and change the hydrocarbon structure, but it'll still be radioactive.
It's all pretty amazing. Just pretty amazing. Okay, Bill, thank you.
I would say this is not the cure for insomnia.
No. Well, I think you really put your finger on it. You said most people don't want to hear about it anymore. Unfortunately, that's true. That's human nature. That's what the sheep do, keep their heads down and keep right on chewing. Hopefully, this audience won't, and we'll do our best
to want to say a little prayer that, that people will come around and they'll actually receive a gift of love from us who are trying to pass the truth on.
Got it.
And they'll pass it on to others and realize that without a love for the future and for each other, they're not going to want the truth.
I agree. All right. Thank you, Bill. Take care. Talk to you next time.
Absolutely. Don't drink the water. As I say, don't commit aquacide from Fukushima.
Isn't that the truth?
Make sure
Okay.
it's filtered, and take care of yourself out there. Check it out, NutriMedical.com. Our Thursday show is the important part with our nuclear expert, Chris Harris, but lots of reports in that article. Read it. We're going to update it here shortly with more information on it.
Very good. Okay. All right. Very good. We'll be right back after this short timeout.